Hi again, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another one of these little mini lectures. And I just wanted to take a little bit here and highlight some key parts of the text and the course material, and compare that with a couple maps. Um, and it's great that our textbook has these wonderful thematic maps. You'll see here in figure 4.15 and following page 4.16, and then this great passage on the just before that in the nature culture section. However, comparing it with some other maps, in this case, some physiographic maps. This is just the terrain feature from Google Maps. I thought it displayed the terrain more clearly than Google Maps. But we'll see that in the second slide here. And so, to read a little bit here, just because it's such a poignant little caption, and I thought I wanted to highlight that for us. And it starts on the previous column. But the Spanish language, which originated in Castile, Spain, a dry and relatively barren land rimmed by hills and high mountains. You can see that represented here. We're in north central, northwestern Spain. And in this map, this is the Comunidad, I think they're known as, the community, what we could think of as equivalent to a province or a state. However, they're not states in Spain. But that's Castile, Spain here in the red outline. Is especially rich in words describing rough terrain. Feel free to pull up a picture of some of the rough landscapes around there, but you can imagine that, seeing all the topographic relief here along the borders of the Comunidad, and allowing speakers of this tongue to distinguish even subtle differences in the shape and configurations of mountains. And apart from being a geographer, I just think this is really fascinating that there can be lots of different descriptions for mountainous terrain. Perhaps La Sierra comes to mind for you, instead of montaña, but even mountain chains, right? In Spanish for cordillera. In English we just tack on chain at the end of mountain. But of course there's mesas and I think another section in the book actually describes lots of these different Spanish words. They go on to say, similarly, the Scottish Gaelic possesses a rich vocabulary to describe mountainous types of topography. This terrain-focused vocabulary is a common attribute of all the Celtic languages spoken by hill peoples. English, by contrast, which developed in the temperate west coastal plains of northern Europe, is relatively deficient in words describing mountainous terrain. However, English abounds with words describing flowing streams and wetlands. And here we start to get into that interesting contrast. I guess I could have pulled up another map of some of the northern Europe plains, or even in England itself. The roots of the English language, though, preceding the transference onto the quote-unquote British Isles. You can think of some of those Anglo-Saxon roots. This vocabulary transferred well to the temperate east coast of the U.S. In rural American South alone, and perhaps some of our students in your experience there could weigh in here on these attributes. One finds river, creek, branch, fork, prong, run, and the bayou and the slough, and those are some of my northern pronunciations, so perhaps there's some more local accent twists to them, and or iterations, that is. This vocabulary indicates that an area is a well-watered land with a dense network of streams, and that it is, right? U.S. Eastern seaboard, as well as the southeast in particular. Clearly, then, language serves as an adaptive strategy, and I always encourage students to mark up your books and become engaged with the text. ideally I would have had color here and some other notes as well, some of those Spanish words written in. So an adaptive strategy. This is such a great phrase that stood out to me there, and we could think of all these other adaptive strategies for living in the world, hunting and ways of relating with our landscapes. But it adds such a neat cultural geography layer to think of language as an adaptive strategy. Vocabularies are highly developed for those features of the environment that involve livelihood. Without such detailed vocabularies, it would be difficult to communicate sophisticated information relevant to communities' livelihoods, which in most places is closely bound to the physical landscape. And in terms of communicating sophisticated information, there's no better way of doing that than maps. What known as the most sophisticated communication devices ever invented. And the amount of information and detail that is relayed in such an image is almost beyond description. Right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. A map is worth 1 billion. So let's take that one step further then and look at this little subsection, natural environment and language sounds. And what stood out to me is a pretty fascinating study here that the authors attribute to Ian Madison, and I wanted to focus on this a little bit because it always stands out as a neat opportunity to look at contrasting examples when we talk about geography as the distribution and differentiation. You'll see in some of my questions back to you, I'm asking, in our discussion boards, I'm asking what's a contrasting example? Where is that different? And so I'm curious, if anybody wants to chime in the discussion board, what stands out to you in this consonants per word map here, more to fewer, and did the language you speak evolve because of the environment? I'll just read the little subcaption here, and in part to try to model, always read these subcaptions, these captions of figures. There's some of the best knowledge to be gained from any journal article or dare we say newspaper. Some of the key most poignant bits are found in the captions. So places with more open spaces tend to have language with lots of consonants, and the sounds of such languages don't carry well in places that are windy and have dense forest cover. And we could put a little asterisk there and begin to look at some of the areas around this map, such as the Pacific Northwest up into coastal BC, some pretty dense forest cover there. But we'll let this scholar's theory play out here, and let's chew on it a little bit. These places tend to have languages with more vowels, and so more vowels would be the fewer consonants represented here in darker green, in the shades of green. And what first pops out is just the always fascinating Papua New Guinea, and not that this is departed in this map, but the extreme linguistic diversity in Papua New Guinea. The 23 maps and charts. Just switch over to that tab for a little bit here. There's a phenomenal map or chart around speaking to that end. So definitely scroll through these and get a sense. You'll see the endangered languages map here. We've been working a little bit in the other discussion board. New York tweets by language. That's pretty fascinating as well. History of English. I mean, they're all riveting to me, but American English, American dialects. Maybe I won't try to find that specific one right now, but there's a really neat graph in there talking about the linguistic diversity of Papua New Guinea. But why I have Bolivia and Peru focused here specifically is because there's this neat little distinction or discrepancy or delineation even between the Bolivian, Peruvian altiplano, high plain. You can hear me saying that word as is the translation there for altiplano, and just north and east of that the Amazonian basin, and some of the mid slopes of the east aspect of the Andes as well, having some very dense forest cover. So it's not that we have to get to the basin in order to get some of that dense forest cover, but I hope this is showing up in my cursor moving across here. Sorry if that's annoying, but you see these 3 or 4 higher consonant per word language spots here on the map, and then just over the mountain range you see this dense zone of much higher vowels per word, and dense forest cover on the north and east slope, and then as we can see mapped out in the Google Maps, Google Earth snapshot here is much higher, drier, and until you get right down to the coast, most of this is higher elevation, and much more open spaces that the authors talk about here, especially the Ian Madison. But yeah, to return, just a bit here to this, so I don't know, I sorry I jumped track there, but thought I'd point that out, and then maybe there's some other areas around the world where you could clue in on such a contrast, and Nigeria and Togo and Benin representing some of that as well. And then, something really interesting for us, or perhaps an anomaly for us to consider here in the Pacific Northwest, in coastal BC, up into the panhandle of Alaska, or is that open spaces a result of being right on the border of the ocean? Yeah, because there's certainly very dense forest cover there, especially with the development of these languages, or the further development of them. So, little parting considerations there. Maybe one of us could get in touch with Ian and Crystal Fay, and find out more of what's going on there. And then this third slide here for us to take home with us from this week is what the authors subtitled "The Natural Environment and Linguistic Refuge." This phenomenal area of the world between Turkey and Iran and Russia, the Caucasus Mountains here. We see its terrain mapped out very well. The Greater Caucasus, hopefully the cursor is tracing that well for you here. Northwest, southeast, orient there, and then these, I don't know if they're called the Lesser Caucasus, but the kind of sub-range to the Caucasus across Armenia and Azerbaijan, and the bulk of Georgia there as well. The authors return to this area also in our political geography section. Some really fascinating just political borders drawn here. You see even from this map, a little exclave of Armenia here within Azerbaijan, and likewise a piece of Azerbaijan separated from it. But to stay on the theme of the linguistic refuge concept, you can see 3 different language families here within the Caucasus Mountains: the Caucasic, Indo-European, as well as Altaic. So an area of extreme linguistic diversity. We'd have to count out all these different colored squares to come up with a better sense of how many languages itself. But and what I wanted to point out is, if we just looked at this figure 4.16 in the book alone without cross-referencing a physiographic map, we could call this terrain layer of Google Maps, you wouldn't get a sense really of what's going on there. Besides them telling you this is the Caucasus Mountains, but you see a extreme diversity of landscapes here by looking at it, comparing with a physiographic map. And so, just some advice to play around and play those experiment with that a little bit. To that end, I'm going to send this link out to you. I've made this first ever in my life little Padlet map, and I've mapped out some of these spots that we just focused on. Hopefully you all could add some little benchmarks as well with the pinpoint